In Geneva, they call for the investigation of Israel for war crimes, while in Luxembourg, the European Court removed Hamas from the list of terrorist organizations.
According to the Jewish organization Community Security Trust, which monitors anti-Semitic incidents in Britain alone, the number of anti-Semitic instances and crimes hit an all-time high in July of this year, coinciding with the Israeli bombardment of Gaza. A total of 302 occurrences were reported, the highest monthly total since records began in 1984. This as some countries want to remove Hamas from the list of terrorist organizations. Let's dig in. Welcome back to MidPoint. Attorney, noted political commentator, Newsmax contributor, and author of the book Terror Tunnels.
Targeted rockets at the rocket launchers. So I don't think it's fair to call what the bombardment coming from Israel. The bombardment came 1,400 rockets from Gaza.
Well, but you will agree, though, that there are those who see it the other way around, and that's part of the reason why Hamas is gaining sympathy with some people.
Is the center of religious liberty. So if people want to blind themselves to reality, there's nothing that can be done except to constantly correct misstatements and to always respond to falsity with truth.
All right, let's talk about a little bit about the anti-Semitic numbers, though. You will agree, though, that these numbers that I quoted and so many others, there is a...
Very focused. It is attributable almost exclusively to radical Muslims that live in countries like France and England and Holland. That's where the violence comes from. There's also anti-Semitism at some of the highest levels, elite anti-Semitism, but it doesn't result in violence. So the anti-Semitic incidents almost all come from radical Muslims. The more general anti-Semitism comes from right-wing fascists in Greece and Hungary and left-wing, kind of neo-left-wing fascists in Italy and in France and in academia in England. But there has been a general increase.
You will agree, though, that there's also been some here in America, because certainly in South Florida there's been some. There have been graves that have been marked in certain areas. There have been Nazi symbols that have been painted on Jewish businesses here. Certainly this year we see this all the time. Why is it, though, that we seem to see more of those stories and hear more of them, even here in the United States? What can we attribute that to?
Anti-Semitism has become legitimated by the hard left and by academic services, decided to ban and boycott an Israeli product called SodaStream. SodaStream, makes soda that you can make by yourself and is healthy and cheap. But because it's made in Israel in a place called Ma'ale Adumim, which is beyond the Green Line, the Harvard Dining Services decided to deny any student the right to use SodaStream. Fortunately, the president of the university immediately rebuffed this, and it's going to be reversed. But you see little things like that, as well as the big things, such as those that occurred in Florida. But we're seeing a legitimate in the hair sites of rhetoric, and so some of it's just anti-Zionism. But
just get all the breaks. Why is it we're still hearing all this? Haven't we grown as a society yet?
You would think so. And, today you can't at a university make a statement that's sexist or racist or homophobic, but you can not only get away with making statements that border on anti-Semitism, but you can hear it in the classroom from faculty members at Columbia University, at Berkeley, at the University of Chicago. Professor Mearsheimer makes all of those statements, and he's a distinguished PA to say those things about Jews and about the nation state of the Jewish people. Then it becomes a generational permission. And so we're going to see more of it as the graduates of these schools and alumni of these classes say, hey, my teacher said it was okay. So that's why it's such a big problem.
Who's the worst offender of this? We've talked about all sorts of colleges that have these teachers there. Is there one? Is it Harvard? Is it certain ones here that simply are the ones who continue to push this forward and administrations will not stop it in its tracks?
I think probably Columbia University is the worst offender. Harvard is among the best. Harvard, the university, has constantly responded to any attempts by radical students or faculty to take over the dialogue, as they did with the SodaStream. Columbia is probably the worst. The president of the university invited Ahmadinejad, who was a Holocaust denier, and have a podium at Columbia. There are professors at Columbia who will not call in Israeli students in the classroom unless they admit their country is involved.
Are these, wait a minute here, Alan, I only got about a minute left then, because we're talking about Columbia then.
Yeah.
Are these people then, in your opinion, simply Jew haters?
Well, many of them are Jews, so that's what makes it most complicated. I was invited by Columbia Amnesty to speak there, and Amnesty International, the national office, rescinded the invitation because of my views on Israel and other views. So Columbia is probably the worst school, and it probably has the highest proportion of Jewish students and faculty. I would say Berkeley is probably a close second, and there are many other smaller universities.
Why do we still then have people in a position of power who hate Jews pulling the strings?
Well, because most of them hate America. And when you scratch an anti-Israel radical, you'll find an anti-American radical. And if you hate America, you're going to hate Israel, because Israel is a democracy like America in the Middle East, and Israel is America's only reliable ally in the Middle East. So anti-Israel attitudes are generally the same, come from the same people that have anti-American attitudes.
Alan, we were going to talk about so many other things here, but quite frankly, we opened up another conversation here that I think is fascinating, that needs to be had a little bit more often, and I look forward to having it again with you very soon, because there's so many issues that we need to touch on this. Alan Dershowitz, once again, thank you very much, and I hope your family's enjoying a happy Hanukkah.
Happy holidays, everybody.
All right, take care. We're back after a short break with the economic fallout on the two biggest stories of the day. Businesses heading back to Cuba. Now, the President Obama has said that there will once again be a free access to Cuba. That's a maybe, because, of course, Congress has to get involved. And the global company that bowed to computer hackers. It's coming up right here on MidPoint.